I think this workshop is supposed to be about how I made this. I started out with defining a voice of the church. And how I did that was I watched Michael Curry's sermons, a whole bunch of them, and I wrote down keywords. And the keywords I came up with were friendly, fun, upbeat, courageous, bold. So that's how I came up with bright colors, large typefaces, a really friendly sans serif look, which is Gill Sans. So I picked these typefaces because they had context, and because so there's a modern Gill Sans, and then there's more of a classical serif typeface, Garamond, which the Book of Common Prayer was typeset in the early 70s, I think, Chris, like something like that. So with that sort of mix, it creates the tone of Michael Curry, what I believe was. And so after I came up with the keywords, so I can try to go to my next slide, I had to look at what already existed. And that was the logo, which absolutely the shield cannot be changed. But it can be upgraded or cleaned up in an evolutionary style. And so I just removed the gradient, is the only thing I did to it. And then I updated the typefaces to Garamond and Gill Sans. Oh, did you have a question? Oh.
Yeah, I asked, I couldn't hear that. Yeah.
Oh, the fonts are Garamond and Gill Sans. Yeah. And the Episcopal is written in an italicized Garamond, semi-bold. So what we chose was Adobe Garamond specifically because it's really accessible to everybody. It's easy to find. I think it's free most of the time. So the one thing I noticed you guys were missing was a white logo, which the white logo you can reversed out. You can use on photography. You can use on color backgrounds. And you can use different, place it in different places. Whereas you have a full color logo, which, and it has to be, you cannot make a gray version or a black version of the shield. It has to be full color or it has to be white. It's the only way it really works. I mean, that was what I found when I was trying to update it. The other thing was using big and small, thick and thin, and using that to sort of grasp people's attentions, make it interesting, make them look at it a little bit. And using a lot of negative space, like here, and here, and here, to like give people's eyes a rest. We don't have to fill up every single part of the page. So that was the sort of how I've started the typography look of it. And then the color palette, which also reflects the keywords: bold, colorful, friendly, warm. And all of these colors work well together. So you can use all of them. You can use one of them as the main color. And you can also use tints too. So you have a really flexible color palette. Or maybe you want your voice isn't that loud and bold. Maybe it's more conservative. And so maybe you just pick grays and then one bright color. And then the photography. So we decided it's better to use real people than stock photography. And so we can find all kinds of snapshots at church functions where people are actually doing things. They're together. They're like candid photos are really good to catch people in the spirit of whatever they're excited about. And so if you put the pictures together, it kind of creates like a film strip or a family album is kind of the look we're going for, so you know how to place the photos. So this is just sort of a basic guide. Once again, big and then small. Work together. Lots of negative space. So the whole guide actually is sort of a layout guide too. And all of those things can go across all channels: video, social media, the web. And if you keep this cohesive voice going through all of these channels, then it's highly recognizable who you are. That's the whole plan of this. But if you just stick to typeface and color, then that's pretty much will define who you are. And then put your logo on there. That's kind of like a simple solution for that. So this was the really hard one. This was the big challenge, was making a family out of all the missions. And so they could live together. Sometimes they do work together. And then they need to have their own brand. So this was something where I decided to use color coding as a way for these missions to brand themselves. So this is Evangelism Initiatives. And so the color is green. And I asked whoever the head of the mission was, well, what color they liked. And they're like, I like greens. And then so from there I could get, something warm, something bright, and also that would reflect the team. So it's really important that whoever you're doing branding for is that you talk to them and interview them and see what they want. But that's how I came up with that green. And then also all these people, they can take this badge or mark and they can just put it on their presentations. They can put it on their postcards or any collateral, and it defines who they are. And then you can also use the color to brand your presentations or however you're going to, whatever you're using your branding on. And then I took all that, and that's what helped create the presiding bishop style. And so he has his own look, which I'm not sure if it's being used, so yeah, or whatever. But if you want to use it, you have this guide for that and to save time. And the Jesus Movement too, which is still in development. We're still working on it. Anyway, that's pretty much how this was made. There was I had help. I had people who told me what the church needed, how they needed a cohesive voice. They needed to be refreshed. And for a graphic designer, it's a dream to freshen up a brand or a look. And when I first started working here, which was a year ago, I Googled Episcopal Church and did an image search, and I saw a lot of different things going on. It was crazy. And so I was like, this is a really great challenge. This is like I said, this is a dream for me. And to help organize the information visually is something that for such a large group as the Episcopal Church, it's like a graphic designer's dream. So this is like my labor of love. Anyway. And if you have any questions, I can give any advice or maybe things that you need to accomplish. I'll go with you first.
I see this as a PDF on the website, but where are the actual assets like the shield and the logo? Because all I can find is the 2012 ones, not the...
Okay. Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, so the website is supposed to be, I'm updating the page for Creative Services, and so I'm going to have logos available for download on that page as soon as the page is approved and they build it. So I'm thinking that's going to happen in the next 2 months, something like that, because the page is already designed. I just have to put it. And I think actually on the website there is a place where the logos can be downloaded. Where is that, Chris?
It's episcopalchurch.org/logos-shields-graphics.
Oh my God.
I know. I just did a quick Google search though, and when I searched Episcopal Shields, it's the second result.
Okay, all right, that's
But
helpful.
we will work on fixing that, absolutely.
Yeah,
And we can email it to everyone.
And there'll be transparent images as well?
Yeah, there'll be what do you mean transparent? Do you mean like a PNG? Yeah, there are going to be, there's a PNG and there's an AI file, I think are the two main, and there's a JPEG, which is like a bigger file version or whatever. So yeah, I have all this, and then I have the horizontal logo, and I have the reversed out one. So they're all like zipped together in, I think, one file, okay?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and that's also something we want to do. Oh, you found it already? Oh, good.
Is the zip file already available? Because prior to General Convention, that would be a really convenient thing to have.
It's available, yeah. Yeah, where Chris said it was. And there's also, I'm going to make available PowerPoint templates. I just finished those.
Oh, great.
Yeah, which is a big time saver because those presentations take forever to make.
Y es en español también.
Yeah, and there's Spanish logos, yeah. And I think there's going to be French if they're not already, but okay. And you had a question?
Yeah, even we're embarking on a rebranding for a large church in Washington, D.C. And even though I'm comfortable doing the graphic design part of it, I feel like I'm too close to it to come up with something super fresh and objective. And so how would you go about finding or choosing a graphic designer to do the rebranding, and
Well,
what does that kind of process look like?
Well, you would find a graphic designer that specializes in brand identity or identity systems, and look at their portfolio. And so I don't know how you would go about finding them. Like, if you could ask, I would ask around, like colleagues who've used designers or can recommend a designer. Look at their portfolio and see if they have the look or the style that you want it to go in that direction. Because you probably have an idea of what you want, don't you? Yeah, sort of. I mean, one of the things I forgot to mention is I made a mood board for when I first started too, and that was to gather images of the look that we wanted that reflected the keywords, the courageous and bold look, colorful, all that stuff. So I found images that I liked, and then I created mood boards, and I showed my colleagues or my team, because you need to assemble a team to help you, and or people who are very opinionated and yeah. And so you show them the mood boards, and then they pick one, and then from that direction you give that to the designer, and the designer can it helps them, give you what you need. Does that answer your question? Does that help? Okay.
Would you mind kind of just walking through kind of the chronology of your process for starting this visual rebrand?
You mean like how long it took?
No, just kind of what steps you started to take. You talked about finding the kind of the keywords and
Okay.
what that process like and the mood board. And I just would love to hear kind of your workflow.
Okay. All right. Yeah, because it was all about the process. That was probably took about 3 months, I think. So the first thing I did, which I just told her, is I created a mood board, and you can do that in Photoshop. You can do it like with a scissors and just make a collage and hang it up on the wall and keep looking at it as you're going through the process, because you want the end result to resemble that mood board. Because it keeps you on track, because you can go off on other tangents easily. So that's one thing, is to stay on track and be inspired by the mood board. Like, you want it to be elevated. You may not look like that right now, or you may think you could look like that, but think about,
Do you want to hook up onto the screen?
no, this is really my notes,
Okay.
is what it is, yeah. I actually wrote down notes on my process, too. And the next thing I did was, like I said, I looked at all of the assets that they already had and saw where I thought it needed to be updated. I don't know when the last time they updated the logo, but it looked like it was 2000? Okay. It looked like early 2000s to me, when gradients were really in, and now they're kind of out. I mean, in maybe 5 years, this will be out of style. I don't know. It's important for the look to be updated and refreshed. So, and I just looked at it, and I thought it was a simple way. And you don't want to change the logo too much where it gets unrecognizable, because then you lose your whole brand. This one was really simple decisions. Pick the type that had meaning. So everything should have meaning that you choose as you're going through the process. The typeface, the colors, all that. And then after I did the logo, which is probably the most difficult part, I think, then you kind of come up with a typography style. And that's when I was talking about mixing up the, big and small, thick and thin, all that kind of stuff. And then the next thing I think I did was, that's when I was able to define a color palette. And then you start applying the typography and the color palette to different pieces of collateral that the church already had. Presentations, any kind of paper systems. So a paper system usually is the first thing you apply the look to and see how it works. And then you lay all of that stuff out, and you stand back, or you hang it up on the wall and you look at it and well, does all of this work together? And then you can find little mistakes and problems, and you fix those things. And I think that's pretty much it. Like that's pretty much the process. I can't think of another part that's missing.
How about the review process? You know, in
Oh,
terms
when
of
you're showing it.
to people and getting feedback.
Yeah. Okay. Those. So yeah, I think I had to review it with maybe 2 or 3 people. I think the PB looked at it too. I hope so. You know, and he liked it, obviously. And luckily for me, this went really smoothly. For some reason, there weren't a lot of changes. There weren't a lot of edits. I think they were really ready for something new, and they were just really grateful that it was happening, and that it was actually looking good and reflecting what they thought the church's voice was. Yeah, so that went really smoothly. I can't remember, other than the photography was tough, because photography is always the most tough thing, the most time-consuming, sourcing photos. And we're trying to figure out a solution to help everybody with a possible, what do we call it, Chris?
Platform for sharing.
A platform for sharing photos. Yeah. Wouldn't that be great? That photos that are license-free or we have permission to use, things like that. So that's because I spent a lot of time sourcing photos, and that was probably the biggest pushback I got was photography. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned a team. Are these people that you might have interviewed beforehand or talked to about, or who's?
No, I did it all, but I was the only designer on the team.
Did you talk to anyone?
Who was
Like, how did you create the mood board? Like, did you talk to people to get the ideas of the images that you might need for your?
Okay. So what I did is I watched Michael Curry's sermons, for example, went to one of his events and talked to people about I did talk to people. They weren't necessarily my team, but they were just people in general who worked in my department and who had opinions. And I asked them, what would you like it? What do you think we should be like? What should we sound like? What should we look like? And they would toss out words, and from those words I would find the images. But I wasn't just typing in the images like courage and then picking those. I would pick things from design books, like really elevated work that other designers did or other design studios did that I would like to aspire to. So I would pick stuff that was really gorgeous. Maybe it wasn't religious or anything like that, but just some kind of typographic style that I really liked. And plus, that was also my personal choice too. But when I showed it to my team, which would have been my manager and the director of communications, and I think Jeremy Tackett helped me too, and I would show them all, and they would say, "Oh, we really like this look, and this makes a lot of sense." Because I didn't know I really didn't know about the church that much. So I needed their help. So that's why I say it's important to interview people and talk to your client or whoever's in charge. Talk to them what they want. Yeah.
I'm curious about still with that phase of interviewing and gathering information, and learning how to have the voice and the visual voice of the organization. And you're describing a process that to me sounds pretty internal in terms of pretty much gathering information from staff versus the breadth of the organization, the folks that might be in other positions in the organization. Can you talk about why that decision was made and what the benefits are of doing that versus a different way?
Okay, and the decision that was made was what?
Well, I don't know if a decision was made, but it sounds like your interviews were mostly internal, on staff, in your office, versus going out and interviewing folks in congregations, priests.
Oh, okay, yeah. I really think that that would have been cool if I did that, actually. I never even thought about that because I was really stuck in an office all the time with a deadline, intensive work, and I just don't think there was the time to spend doing something like that when what she said is like the most ideal thing. And if you can span this out over 6 months or 8 months or whatever, that would be the best. But I did it in like 2 to 3 months or something like that because there was a big hurry for some reason.
Mm-hmm. We just refreshed in a big way our diocesan logo. And one thing I did, and I'm happy to make it available to other people, I went and checked out just about every diocese's logo
and put it on a kind of a contact sheet
Mhm.
and pass that around at our staff and said, what do we like, what we don't like,
Yeah.
and not that there are any designers on staff, but it allowed me to sort of narrow down what other people were doing, and that was pretty helpful to say, we really like the way Rhode Island did the colors. Sea and sky represents who we are, and it reflects our past logos. So
Right, that's exactly what graphic designers do for their clients who don't know what they want yet, and so they give them choices, and like you can have this look or that look, and then it helps guide them. Whereas I didn't have that, I was just pretty much on my own, and so I knew what I liked, and I just showed them kind of what I was thinking, and hopefully they would like it. If they didn't, then I would have to dig a little bit deeper and maybe show them an edited mood board like that for them to say like, oh, this is more what we're looking for, not what you showed us, But luckily I didn't have to go there, so that is an important step too.
how do you get? My other question is, right now, so because we've just launched and I've eliminated the old logo on every diocesan piece that I have control over. But I was just on a parish website and saw our 2003 logo, the font, what was I thinking in 2003? Anyway, but it is what it is. And I mean, aside from going and scouring every church bulletin and whatever, I mean, is there a strategy to sort of in the graphic design world to enforce your logo on your subsidiaries? If you want to call them.
Oh gosh, that's a really hard one.
Anybody,
Yeah.
Well, actually, I was
Yeah,
gonna
go
say,
ahead.
I know one of the problems that we have in our diocese, and I'm in Texas, is that the churches feel that we don't give them the materials, or we just assume that they will go to the website media room and download it for themselves. So we found that when we actually send it to like the priests or the admins of the churches, that we get a better response. Is it perfect? No. Do we still find the old logo? Yes. But I think if you just literally say, hey, this is it, please use it from now on, then you might get a better response.
And there's ways to get the message out to people. Like that's why I chose to do a tabloid style paper, was because then people can have it in their hands, on their desk. They can maybe hang it up on the wall, hopefully, if they want to, and like just something that's tangible and accessible, instead of like they may or may not ever look at your PDF that you made for your new look or whatever. I mean, they may not even open it. So I like to get off of the computer and do things in more print. I want to bring more print back to people because I feel like we're losing it, and people maybe will actually pick it up and read it. That was the reason for that. So think of ways that you can get out your message to people who are responsible for your design, or maybe the people that do the desktop publishing, and figure out like maybe you make them a newspaper and showing off your new style.
It's an awesome idea. I was so pleased.
Yeah, try that. I mean, really, and mail it to everybody, and they'll be like, "Wow, what's this?" And then they'll be hopefully inspired to do it, because you can't make people do what you can't force them to do it. I guess the word enforce, I can't go there. No. Oh, go ahead.
And maybe you don't deal with this, but if you're like the one designer on a staff of non-designers, sometimes, at least when I send things to people, I'll get kind of like bad design feedback. Like,
oh yeah.
I'll send this to them and be like, this is great, just make all of the white space lime green and add these 10 headlines to everything, and then we're good. At least how you do it.
That's so funny, because that's exactly what happens, right? Like I said, like, oh, you don't have to. I was using as an example, I like to show like, oh, I don't have to fill this all up. This is white space. People call it negative space or dead space. No, this is white space that's like very, it just helps. And I try and explain to them, and I show them examples of why I can't do that. And I won't. And I actually think it's unethical to force a designer to make bad design, And then they're like, unethical, I don't want to go there. Yeah, so.
I'll send them to you.
Okay. You can, anybody can call me too if they, I should give out my phone number. Yeah, go ahead.
What is some of the reasoning behind having a separate branding for the Jesus movement compared to the church or the individual ministries?
Okay.
And how do you use that sort of reasoning and logic to, but also like curb the idea of every single event that comes forward can have its own branding too. Like we're existing in entities where like we do 3 events that recur every single year, and like everybody wants it to have its own look. You know, what's the line?
So the Jesus Movement logo was designed before this was made, okay? And I did it, and it's being updated to match the new identity. Yeah, so that's why when you say it's separate, you're right. It is separate looking, and it doesn't use the same typefaces. This isn't Garamond. This isn't Gil Sans, and but at the time, it was something they wanted to do before I got into this. I think it was like a time thing. So, with the vision that it would be evolutionarily designed later, so which is actually happening right now. So what you're talking about are like separate campaigns inside of your church, right? Or brand. So that's one thing I try. So you could use your guide or this guide, and you would create a campaign that had elements of this in it, but you don't necessarily have to have a logo. Maybe you just lock up the words to match this look, but create its own sort of style. I don't know if that makes sense. So use typographical answers to create a campaign. Don't try and create a new logo or a whole new look. Use one of the colors in the color palette, for example. So you would take this big color palette and this broad look, and you would like just take a little piece of it and make it special for this one campaign. That's what I've been doing, because I have to do a lot of campaigns. And
if it was an event, for example, like an annual event, or even an annual like fundraising campaign, would you change that every year, or would you, or even like one of those connecting pieces each year, and keep it one campaign year over year?
I would change it every year, because I think, think about what your audience wants. Do they want to see the same thing every year, or they want to get excited about the new thing? That's what I think. Excited about the new campaign or the new event. And you could use maybe the same lockup of the title or something, but just make sure that everything else is like refreshed, I guess. That's how I would do it.
I think one of the projects that we do that falls into that category is a stewardship campaign, or a stewardship package that goes out every year. How much of it do you make the same to make it recognizable and for people to understand that this is an action item for them, versus, and how much do you make it different and refreshed?
Okay, do you mean so that it's like a call to action type of campaign?
Yeah, for a stewardship.
How do you make it stand out?
Asking for people for annual giving.
Okay. Oh, kind of like the annual,
Fundraising.
like the annual appeal that we just did, or that I just did. Okay. So like that should be really special. And my whole concept behind the annual appeal was and I wish I had a sample of it right now. I don't have one with me, but was to take the whole of the church and like put it together into something. Like I made sort of like a quilt. Look, visual quilt is what I call it. So I took all these different images and colors, and I just put it all together in like a checkerboard fashion or whatever. And so that's how I would approach a big thing like that. It only happens once a year, right? Maybe. And so that should be like something that. It's a year-long thing. So it should have, I look at it as having lots of little pieces that create a cohesive look, that create a look on its own. It's kind of my, design challenge there. Does that make sense? Oh, hey.
The Episcopal Church has a thing called the TENS program, and every year they have a new design for the stewardship program. Have you been on that site?
No.
And they have all the Word documents, all the graphics, all the logos, and it changes every year. You can make a poster out of it. You can make like the United Way does, and building one of those, what is that called? How much money you've made. You can take that graphic and you can do whatever you want with it. I'll get the site. I'll bring it up and I'll tell you what it is.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, because you don't have to recreate the wheel every year. And they do a really nice job. The graphics are lovely.
Yeah, that sounds like something we want to do. Like we want to have a template systems for people to use. Or maybe that's what I was hoping you guys could help me with and help me figure out things that you need that I could make and make accessible to everybody. If there's anything you need to tell me, and I'll try and maybe like a core piece of collateral that you could rebrand yourself to. I don't know. Any other questions?
I have one. And we talked about this before, but I thought you had really a great idea about it. So if I'm trying to choose typefaces for my parish or my diocese, what kind of things do I need to keep in mind as I'm doing that? What do I need to know about my parish or diocese in order to pick something that matches well?
Oh, well, I would hope that your parish or diocese already has a typeface that they usually use, and stick with that is a good idea, unless you want to update it. Because just picking random typefaces and using a different one all the time, that's a really bad habit to do, because then you lose your look. And you should have, and when you have a cohesive look all the time and you're consistent about it, then it's consistent to your audience and they know who you are. So like, I wouldn't put a lot of thought into like picking typefaces. I would just use what you have if they have a standard. And if you don't, you can just use Garamond. It's just not. And yeah, if you're church, yeah, if you don't like, that's funny. If you don't like the typeface that your parish uses, maybe you can approach the communications person and say like, this is why I think we can do better. We can elevate our look, and then but you would have to give them examples, and that's kind of like how you would start the process, I think. Mm-hmm.
While we're speaking of typefaces and Comic Sans, I just had a question about readability. I've seen pretty different information about serif versus sans serif. What's easier for people with disabilities? What's easier for people who just maybe have some level of visual impairment or just aging
Like
or
me.
have terrible eyesight? Like
Yeah,
me.
me too.
And so what are your thoughts on that? On the
Well,
serif versus sans serif?
Well, I think that serif typeface is easier to read. I mean, I think that's easy to read. And it has to do with the weight. And I like a sans serif typeface. But a serif typeface is good for blocks of text. I think I have an example in here. Yeah, and I talk about it. Because the sans serif typeface is supposed to mimic handwriting, right? So it's easier on the eyes. But that's because you're reading a whole bunch of text. But if you're just reading headlines or whatever, I think this is much better. Like, I think this is harder to read when it's big than this, in my opinion. I don't know if you guys agree. So that's kind of my opinion on it.
Yeah, is that, you know, I feel like so much, we're like zooming in and like,
Oh,
as
yeah.
you zoom in, like it loses it.
Zoom in. I do that sometimes when I'm looking at print, too.
Yeah. And it loses kind of the edges or something. So I'm assuming as you chose these fonts are fonts that are helpful to folks who might have a difficulty reading, so they can zoom and it doesn't make it look all blurry.
Right, exactly. Because I have really bad eyesight too, and I'm wearing contacts right now, but I've always had bad eyesight. So it's important to me that things are legible. And if it's not legible, then you just don't even print it or don't even use it. And that's why if you use weight to help, depending on, I mean, I know people are going to use their phones a lot now. So I think a sans serif works better on the web. And I just keep things at like 14 points for the web. It's a really good rule. You know, it's really all you can do, I think. And also, don't use 100% black. Use 90% black too. It's easier to read, is what I was taught in art school. And I've sort of, if you look at the difference, the black contrast on the bright white is kind of painful on to your eyes for video screen. So that's what I've been doing, even in print too. Is that it? I guess, oh, go ahead.
Okay, I'm still kind of trying to formulate this question, but I think your response is like, oh, if you don't have one, just use Garamond. It's kind of prompted this, you know, we're a church that has kind of these levels of administration. You know, we have the Episcopal Church, and we have our provinces and our dioceses and our parishes. Do you have thoughts on how we build some sense, or do we build some sense of cohesive visual identity throughout all of those layers?
That would be nice. That's the most ideal thing. But how are you going to enforce that?
Well,
You see, that's the problem is
but
that.
without necessarily going to this level of enforcement, say some of us would like to do that and participate in some sort
Okay.
of visual, we're hopefully going to gear up for some rebranding in the next year or two, and I'm looking at this and thinking, okay, like what pieces of this would I maybe want to bring into our diocesan branding, and what would I like to pass on to our parishes with some encouragement? I mean, do you have aspects of that you think would be the ideal for building a downwardly mobile visual identity?
Okay. Well, first of all, would be this is a small, inflexible style guide. There's some that I've used that are like this thick and this big, and there's 3 or 4 versions of it, and you have to stick to everything. And they have a brand person, police department that has to go through them, and they get a Shadler ruler with these little tiny points, and they measure everything. And that's like the worst thing for a designer. And it's like you don't want to do anything. Or I also did work for Thomson Reuters, and their style guide was like 4 pages long, like 8.5 by 11, and that was it. And all they were like, use these colors, use these typefaces, and this is how we like the type to be used. This is how we like the layouts to look, and that's it. And with that, I was able to create like really fun, easy stuff, successful work. And TIA Craft was the one who had all the really strict rules, and it was a disaster, and it was a big time waste. So that was like, I don't want to waste time trying to like interpret all of your rules. I want to be a little bit free to interpret. So I would, this is why I made this, was I was hoping that everybody could use it at every level and take from it what they want to use. So if your church is conservative, you can go with this. You can use more Garamond, because I did in the typography section. I think this looks very conservative. It's very neat. This is more fun, So you can pick from these limited parameters, you can create all kinds of interesting things. So I would hope that because you have a flexible guide that you could, go many directions with it. Conservative, fun, whatever.
Well, it's interesting to think that it's a smaller set of rules to give flexibility versus a smaller set as a strict thing.
Right.
That's
Yeah,
where
a smaller strict thing would never work, right? Anything strict doesn't work.
Well, I think that is sometimes where we wind up feeling stuck, is that we're being like assigned these things and not realizing that there is some flexibility within. To
Okay.
trust our eye and to trust where we can go with it. It's like, oh, these are the rules, so I have to stick to these rules versus feeling
Yeah,
some parameters
because
that might
your voice is going to be different than other parishes and whatever. Just slightly, maybe, but enough that if you're a designer or if you're just doing desktop publishing, you want that freedom, because it's fun to do this work, and so you want to be inspired and not like forced into like a little space that doesn't work for you.
Actually, I had a totally separate question if nobody else has anything. Which is that what would you do if you were working for an congregation, a parish, a camp, for example, that had a really strong sense of history, so like a very a really bold street sign that has been there for 150 years that has their logo in this way.
Mm-hmm.
How do you incorporate that, or without like terrifying everybody? How do you sort of evolve something that's really historically significant or permanent? That's not in print, that's literally in concrete.
Oh, okay.
That kind of thing, like
Like a diocesan seal.
Yeah, okay. Well, some of them, I take them and I clean them up. Like when I say clean them up, I don't change them in any way, but I redraw them in Illustrator so that they look really sharp and clean. Because a lot of the images are really old of those seals and logos and stuff, so they need to be updated. Only cleaned up, that's all, but don't change anything because you can't. And then so when you apply it on things, it looks really fresh. And so you could take whatever that concrete sign is or whatever, and you could take a picture of it and you could maybe draw it in Illustrator or have somebody draw it, or you could use a photograph of it. But I would definitely, if it's important, I would definitely incorporate it in everything, because that's really cool. So because have a sense of history and context to your work is the best thing ever, I think. It makes it shine the most. Yeah. Yeah.
I inherited the current house fonts that we use at our parish. And they're,
What are they?
well, they're Palatino, and it's a version, some old, but it's an old font that no one, I can't give to any, I mean, it must be some really old version of the font.
Mm-hmm.
And something called Frutiger.
Oh, Frutiger's cool.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so that would be okay to share with others, but now I'm beginning to have a staff who can help me a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and they want to help, but we can't. So I've been thinking about changing
The typefaces?
the typefaces.
Okay,
And
well.
but you mentioned that you chose and you use Garamond because it's accessible and you know it's easier for people to get
To
hold of.
find, yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I'm thinking. We need to have a more accessible typeface that others, you know, on our staff can have, and that we don't have issues.
Yeah, because you will
trading
have.
back and forth.
You will have issues, like if people won't be able to use it, the typefaces. And I think Frutiger is one of those that's not something that's you can find easily, right? Yeah, it's an expensive typeface,
Right.
and it's some really fancy, classic German designer or whatever. It's like you have to pay a lot of money to have a license, I think. And so it's good to find something similar to those looks. Like
I really like Gill Sans.
I do too,
A
yeah.
little bit here and there.
And that could
just to
replace
see
the
how I like it.
Frutiger.
Yeah.
Because they're both geometric, I think. Well, they're kind of geometric typefaces. They're very similar.
You know, that's
They're
a little
classic.
fresher to me than Frutiger, I guess, because I've been looking at Frutiger forever.
And Gill Sans is known as the Helvetica of England too. That's its nickname because the Church of England uses it exclusively. Yeah, so that's why it's so recognizable. But it's but we don't really want to use. I didn't want to use Helvetica, even though that's what was popular in America, because I think it looks like it's from the 60s, which I love the 60s, but I also think some people look at it and they're like, oh, I'm so tired of looking at Helvetica. It's so boring. I'm so, you know, everyone's tired of looking at it. We've looked at it all of our lives, obviously the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And now,
Highway signs.
huh?
Apparently it's used on highway signs.
It's on everything. It's
So we look at it all the time.
so we're all sick of it. So we need just something that's a little different. I think like Gill Sans is refreshing. But Palatino is a really old-looking typeface, like very classic-looking. So I don't know. I think Garamond looks more fun. So that would be an easy transition for you. Did you have a question? Oh, sorry. Like this? Oh, up here. It's okay. I didn't know I was wearing a microphone. I would have worn something different. Sorry. Thanks. Yeah. I think you should go for it. Do it.
Okay.
See what happens. Anything else? Is that it? Oh, yeah.
What if you're sick of Garamond?
Huh? What if you get sick of Garamond? Oh my gosh. I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know when I'll get sick of it. You know what I'm not sick of is Bodoni is my absolute favorite typeface, and I used to design in that all the time. And it's just like kind of fun and juicy looking with big fat like serifs but I think Garamond has so many weights and so many families that it's really hard to get tired of it. You have to find a typeface, I should have mentioned that has a big family of different weights and I don't know, there's old stock. Frutiger does. Well, that's a really classic typeface.
And that's website friendly because remember it has to be compatible with Google.
Totally.
Else you can't put the same branding on your website because that's what I do is web design, and you have to make sure that it fits both for print and for web.
Exactly. It has to be
different, or you have to find a similar one.
web safe is really important. Present PowerPoint safe is important too, because that's a rough program that doesn't work with everything and will look like a disaster if somebody else opens it on their computer and they don't have the same typeface and it just defaults to something else and it looks terrible. So. Oh, I know. And you're like, why do they do that? Why can't they embed the typeface? I mean, maybe they can, but I just don't know how to do it. But it's a big challenge with presentations. So web safe is really important. That should be. And if the typeface you want to use isn't web safe, then you can find a typeface that's similar to it that's web safe, but you use it only on the web. And that's what we did for ENS, the Episcopal News Service. They use a different typeface for their website, and it's called Open Sans. Yeah, and it's similar because we couldn't. I think Gill Sans we had trouble with the licensing or something for the webs. I don't know. There were some details. So you'll run into problems. So you have to visually find safe fonts and don't let the web drive your identity, because the web is just a small channel of the big picture. So you don't want it to have to like drive you to use Open Sans, like a Google typeface for everything. You know, use the classics, use something with a big family, and then, you know, go to the other stuff for, you know, the other problems you have. Did somebody raise their hand? Oh.
I was just gonna say, I use from Diocese of Columbia in Seattle.
Okay.
I use Open Sans quite a bit actually. It's got quite a large family.
Yeah, it is a really good typeface. Like it's.
I used to use Gill Sans as well, but
You just went ahead and did.
a little more options for me with Open Sans and it works across all platforms. So.
So do you, so did you say you do mostly web work
I
or?
do like formerly print production. Now I do mostly video production, but I also do logos and other kind of.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good to know because Open Sans is free too.
That's another reason why I went to it.
Yeah. But even though it's free doesn't mean it's a good typeface. It just means that it's just easy to use and it looks pretty good. It's decent. It's a copy of, I can't remember what typeface. It's a copy of it, you know. So all he did was hire a typographer probably to redraw another typeface and then brand it and they own it and then they put it out there in the world for everyone to use. So, but it is a good option, definitely. And it's cool to hear that you use it in print too and you like it. Okay. Somebody else raise their hand? No.
Well, I'm just going to we also, Diocese of North Carolina also use Open Sans for web and video, but we do use Garamond for print.
Oh, cool. Okay. And you can use, you don't use Gill Sans too for anything for print?
No.
Use Open Sans for print?
We use Garamond.
Okay.